At first, it looked like an ordinary rich family Thanksgiving dinner. Expensive wine, fake smicefuls, and a father preparing to make a major announcement. But one woman at the table was hiding a secret powerful enough to destroy everyone's plans. Her family thought she was still the disappointing daughter who ran away years ago. They had no idea she was the private CEO behind the company trying to buy them out. As her father stood proudly to announce the future of his empire, she waited until the perfect moment, then spoke 5 words through the room. I am the buyer. What happened next changed the family forever.
Ever been the black sheep in your own family? Then you'll get this. I'm Ava Sterling, the invisible daughter of the Sterling real estate dynasty, and being underestimated is my secret weapon. Walking into our Chicago mansion for Thanksgiving, they had no idea I was about to detonate a bomb in their perfectly curated lives. They only saw quiet, bookish Ava. My father's big announcement was supposed to secure his legacy instead. It was the trigger for a revenge plot he never saw coming. If you love a good family business takedown, you're going to want to stick around for this. Make sure to subscribe and comment, because you're about to watch me tear down my father's empire from the inside. I was raised in Winnetka, an exclusive Chicago suburb. It's a massive Tudor estate with manicured lawns and a fleet of servants. We were the picture of high society success. My grandfather started Sterling Properties with a few apartment buildings after the war. It was a respected local firm until my father Marcus took the reins. He leveraged and bullied his way to a $500 million valuation and made damn sure everyone knew it was his achievement and his alone. There were 3 Sterling children. Leo, the 40-year-old crown prince, was handed a vice president title after business school, but he spent more time on yachts in Monaco than in the office. I was the overlooked middle kid, the one who inherited my grandfather's actual eye for architecture. I was designing blueprints at 16 and graduated top of my class from Northwestern. I saw the future of urban development. To my father, I was a footnote. Then there's Chloe, the youngst, who used our name to become a Chicago social media influencer. Chloe loved the girl boss image but couldn't tell you the difference between zoning and financing. She'd post photos from charity galas, acting like a philanthropist while contributing nothing. Our mother, Eleanor, was from an old Chicago banking family, and her solution to any problem was another glass of Chardonnay. She'd occasionally try to defend me, but always folded to protect my dad's massive ego. Marcus, dear, maybe Ava has a point, she'd murmur, but would shrink back the second he glared at her. Eleanor, this is business, he'd bark before turning to Leo to talk about their new skyscraper deal. Every dinner was a board meeting I wasn't invited to. Dad and Leo discussed land acquisitions and capital gains, throwing around terms while I sat there, knowing more about sustainable architecture than both of them put together. If I dared to contribute, Dad would just pat my hand. That's cute, Ava. Let's leave the big deals to the men, shall we? The breaking point came when I was 22. Fresh out of college, I designed a visionary plan for a green mixed-use development. It was years ahead of its time. I spent months building the models and the financial projections. My father reluctantly let me pitch it to the board, acting like it was some adorable little art project. My heart was hammering as I walked into that boardroom, my portfolio under my arm. The board was just his collection of cronies, old guys who just stared at my presentation. I was barely 5 minutes in when Dad loudly cleared his throat and held up his hand to stop me. Okay, Ava, I think we've seen enough, he said with a smile that could freeze fire. Ava, darling, it's very creative, but it's not practical for our business. Our clients want luxury high-rises, not some eco-friendly fantasy. He grinned at the board. She's just out of school, full of ideals. Now, let's get back to the real world. My face was burning hot with shame as they all laughed and said I packed up my models. That night, I left Chicago. I swore I'd build an empire so big he'd have to see it. I moved to Austin with everything I owned. My parents called it my Texas phase. She'll be back asking for a handout once reality hits, I heard my dad say. The first years were tough. I had a tiny studio apartment in Austin, and my money was draining away. I lived on ramen and bad coffee, working constantly, first for a small firm, then for myself. I poured every cent into my own company, Apex Ventures, which I founded as A. Vance. Nobody knew who I was. I had to be totally separate from the Sterling name. I began by flipping small houses and designing commercial spaces for local businesses, reinvesting every penny. After 3 years, I had a small crew and a proper office in downtown Austin. The breakthrough came when I finally got a loan for a massive sustainable community project, a bigger, bolder version of the one my father laughed at. Investors wanted in, but I never gave up a single share of my company. In the next 7 years, Apex Ventures became a powerhouse, buying up properties and expanding nationwide. We were soon worth over $700 million. And I did it all as A. Vance. In the real estate world, A. Vance was a legend, a mysterious visionary who never showed up to industry events. For the few times a public face was needed, I'd send my chief operating officer to speak for me. My family was completely in the dark. On our brief holiday calls, I'd just tell them my little design firm was doing fine. My father never asked any follow-up questions. In his mind, I was a failure. And that's exactly how I wanted it. I was turning Apex into the weapon that would bring his whole world crashing down. They didn't know that for the past year I had been anonymously buying up the land and the debt surrounding my father's flagship skyscraper project. I studied his plans, found every weakness, and positioned Apex to box him in. 6 months ago, my CFO made a quiet offer to buy him out. Of course, my father laughed it off. Now, 10 years after he humiliated me, I was flying back to Chicago for Thanksgivings. Sterling Properties was over-leveraged and bleeding cash, and I was about to become his greatest enemy and his own salvation. The week before Thanksgiving, I was in my Austin penthouse office, closing the final deal that would seal his fate. My assistant handed me my travel plans. "Your jet to Chicago is confirmed for Tuesday," she said. "Are you sure you don't want the lawyers with you?" I just shook my head. "No, this one's personal. I need to do this myself." Later, my phone rang. It was my best friend, Maya. "Are you seriously going ahead with the Thanksgiving train wreck?" she asked. I looked out at the city lights. I have to. I need to see his face when he loses everything. "I just can't forget that horrible Christmas 2 years back," she said. "Your dad gave a toast to Leo making partner, while you were quietly closing a deal worth more than their entire portfolio." That memory still burned. Dad raised his champagne glass to the future, beaming at my brother, who was too wasted to even notice. "This Thanksgiving is going to be different," I promised her. "This time, I'm changing the rules." That night, as I packed, every single outfit I chose was a piece of armor. The old Ava was gone for good. My suitcase was my arsenal. A razor-sharp Tom Ford suit, a D-ounce for Thanksgiving dinner, Louboutin heels every piece a declaration of victory. A Cartier watch, a Bottega Veneta briefcase, and simple diamond earrings. It wasn't loud, but it screamed money. For years, I hid what I'd built. Now, I wanted them to see it before I brought the house down. On Tuesday morning, I stepped onto the private jet. During the flight, I went over the takeover documents one last time, ensuring every detail was flawless. It was bitterly ironic. For a decade, I flew coach back to Chicago, stuck in a middle seat eating stale pretzels, all while building the very company that paid for this arrival. The jet touched down at a private airfield, where a black Maybach was waiting on the tarmac for me. Driving through the familiar oak-lined streets of Winnetka, I felt a bizarre tug-of-war between nostalgia and pure ice in my veins. The Sterling estate looked identical, a massive Tudor mansion with its pristine lawns dusted by a light November snow. A huge festive wreath was already on the door. I had the driver wait, took a steadying breath, and walked up the stone pathway. My mother opened the door, her face a mask of surprise. Her eyes instantly raked over my clothes. "Ava, my dear," she breathed, her hug smelling of expensive perfume and Chardonnay. "You look so successful. Is that watch new?" "Just something I bought myself," as I said, pulling away gently. She ushered me inside, talking nonstop about the catering and Chloe's latest sponsored post. I set down my briefcase, home, and all the drama that came with it. "Your father is in his library," she said. "He's buried in some massive project. He's being so secretive about it." I forced a small smile. "I'll go say hi." Dad's library was his command center, mahogany shelves, leather chairs, and stacks of blueprints. I knocked once, then opened the door myself, a small act of defiance. He looked up, a flash of surprise quickly hidden behind his usual dismissive mask. "Ava, you made it." He gave me a brisk, awkward hug, gesturing to a chair. "How was the flight from Austin?" "Perfectly smooth," I said, ignoring the seat. "I took a private jet." "Saves time," I said. He looked confused. "A private jet? That S not cheap, Sarah." I just shrugged. Business is good. Before he could ask more, his phone rang. "Excuse me," he said, turning away. "I have to take this. My opening." My eyes darted to his desk, and there it was. The buyout offer from Apex Digital Ventures. My company's logo stared back at me. My pulse hammered, but I kept my expression neutral when he turned back. "Sorry about that," he said, moving the folder. "Big things happening. It's delicate." The same dismissive tone. It didn't even hurt anymore. "Of course, Dad. I'll get out of your hair." I left his study and headed to my old room. Mom kept it perfectly preserved, a shrine to my younger self. Academic decathlon medals, robotics prizes, the Duke University pennant. They were all just dusty artifacts from a past life, all for a father who barely noticed. After a quick shower, I found Ethan in the library, a glass of bourbon in his hand at 3 p.m. He had Dad-esque build and bravado, but none of the grit. Well, he drawled, lifting his glass. The prodigal sister returns. Still messing with those little blogs out in San Francisco? Something like that, I answered, clenching my teeth. How's that little tech startup of yours? Finally turning a profit? His condescending sneer was a familiar welcome. Before I could answer, my sister Sophie burst in, phone already recording for her live stream. "Sarah's home, everyone! A Vance family reunion!" She chirped, planting 2 air kisses near my cheeks. "You look incredible! Land a tech billionaire yet?" "Just building my own empire," I said, dodging her lens. Ethan grabbed his new girlfriend, whispering as Sophie kept rolling. "That's Tiffany. She's 23, an influencer." Right on cue, a striking brunette appeared, dressed head to toe in luxury athleisure. Ethan pulled her close, grinning. "Tiffany, this is my sister Sarah. She's in San Francisco doing some sort of tech thing." He waved away my life's work. "Oh, I adore San Francisco!" Tiffany gushed. "The vegan food scene is divine." Our awkward conversation was mercifully interrupted by Dad's booming voice from his office. The sound was muffled, but his excitement was clear. "Yes, that's it! We signed the day after Thanksgiving. 75 million, not a penny less." "Apex has been a tough negotiator," he continued. I escaped to the kitchen for a moment of peace. The household staff had always been more like family than my own. Maria, our housekeeper since I was a child, was prepping dinner. "Miss Sarah," she said, her smile genuine and kind. "It's wonderful to see you. You look radiant. San Francisco agrees with you." "Thanks, Maria." "Need a hand?" She shook her head. "No, dear. Your mother insists on perfection. A big day," she said. "Your father has a major announcement." I smiled faintly, wondering if everyone knew about my own deal but me. "So I've heard," I murmured. The cocktail hour was a complete disaster. Mom drifted through the room with a painfully fake smile. Dad glanced at his phone constantly. Ethan boasted about his new Tesla while Sophie documented every second for her followers. I just nursed my wine and observed. The needy child desperate for their validation was long gone. In her place was a CEO about to shatter their universe. "Dinner is served," Mom called out, guiding us into the formal dining room, where generations of Vances had argued before. I took a deep breath and stepped inside, knowing nothing would ever be the same. The Vance Thanksgiving dinner was always pure theater. The long mahogany table shone beneath a sprawling crystal chandelier, laid with the heirloom china used once a year. Ornate silver candelabras held dozens of flickering candles, illuminating a centerpiece Mom likely had commissioned from a top floral designer. I had to suppress a laugh. I was placed at the absolute opposite end of the table from my father. Naturally. Ethan, the chosen son, sat at his right hand with Tiffany beside him. Sophie was on his left. Mom was at my end, an ocean of polished mahogany between us and the throne. Maria and the other staff began serving a butternut squash soup. Next was an arugula salad, then the star of the show, a massive, perfectly roasted turkey, surrounded by a dozen elaborate side dishes. Dad began carving with practiced precision as Sophie's phone captured it all. "And here's Daddy carving the turkey, just like Grandpa Vance taught him." "The legacy continues," she narrated. I watched Mom flinch before quickly downing the rest of her wine. Her fourth glass, I counted. Once our plates were full, Dad clinked his glass for the traditional gratitude toast. We each had to share what we were thankful for. It once meant something. Tonight, it was just another part of the show. Ethan, as the firstborn, began. "I'm grateful for another banner year at Vance Publishing," he said, though my research showed their sales had been flat for months. "And for my new Porsche," he grabbed Tiffany's hand, "and for this incredible woman." Tiffany giggled and kissed his cheek as Sophie made a gagging face for her audience. Then Sophie took her turn. "I'm so thankful for hitting 5 million followers! My new cosmetics line is killing it, and I adore sharing the Vance family story with my fans." She flashed a rehearsed smile at Dad, who gave a slight nod, even though he constantly complained about her influencer career. When it was my turn, I placed my glass down and spoke with purpose. "I'm thankful for the tough lessons. The ones that teach you that being underestimated is an advantage, that work ethic matters more than a family name, and that true value is something you build, not something you inherit." I lifted my glass. "To making your own way." Dad's face tightened at my tone, before launching into his own speech about his publishing legacy. Mom made a slurred toast to family. Dad kept checking his phone, whispering to my mother, whose smile was brittle. Ethan was telling some exaggerated story about meeting a famous author while Sophie read fawning comments from her live feed. During dessert, Dad sharply tapped his glass with a fork, silencing the chatter. "I have an announcement," he declared, rising from his chair like a king addressing his court, a man who commanded attention. The room fell silent. Even Sophie lowered her phone. "As you all know, I've dedicated my life to making Vance Publishing this gold standard in literature. But every legacy must adapt, and it's time for us to begin a new chapter. He paused for dramatic effect. I have made the decision to sell the company. Ethan sputtered on his drink. What? Dad, you can't be serious. Dad raised a hand, cutting him off. I've been negotiating with a very keen digital media firm for months. We're closing the deal the day after tomorrow. Sophie gasped theatrically. But Daddy, what about the Vance legacy? My whole brand is built on being a publishing heiress. That brings me to my next point, Dad said, his expression unreadable. The proceeds from the sale will not be distributed to you as an inheritance. Ethan and Sophie erupted. That's our birthright, Ethan roared, slanting the table. What do you mean? Sophie wailed, her phone capturing the whole chaotic breakdown for her audience. Where's the money going? Dad waited for the noise to die down. Your mother and I are keeping a portion for our retirement. The rest will establish the Vance Foundation, a new charity promoting literacy. Ethan jumped up, his face flushed with rage. I gave my life to that company. You promised I would take over someday. You promised us. Sophie was in full-blown tears, angling her face for the camera. Amid the drama, I sat motionless, taking a calm sip of wine. My mother's eyes met mine, a spark of curiosity within them. Sarah, she said softly, you don't look shocked at all. The argument died down as all eyes swung to me as if they'd forgotten I was in the room. Actually, I said, putting my glass down with deliberate calm, I have one question. I locked eyes with my father. Who is the buyer? Dad puffed out his chest, reveling in the moment. A major tech firm, Apex Digital Ventures. He grinned. They're paying $75 million, an incredible offer for a legacy publisher today. I took a slow drink of water, letting the quiet stretch. Dad, I said, my voice steady and clear, I am Apex Digital Ventures. The room went dead silent. The old clock in the hall chimed 10, each bong landing like a gavel in the stunned silence. No one moved. No one even seemed to be breathing. I watched my father's expression shift from confusion to disbelief, and then to pure unadulterated fury. Ethan broke the spell, his chair screeching as he leaped up, tipping his wine glass. Red wine stained the white linen like blood. What in the hell are you talking about? He yelled, looking between me and Dad. Sophie, naturally, was still filming, her hands trembling as she pointed the camera at me. Oh my God, she whispered to her followers. Did you guys hear that? The one buying Vance Publishing? Mom grabbed for her glass, realized it was empty, and reached for the wine bottle itself. I stood up, feeling a wave of calm now that the secret was out. Yes, Dad. Me. My father finally spoke. That's ridiculous, he sneered. Apex is run by some ruthless operator in Silicon Valley, not my daughter and her little lifestyle blog in San Francisco. I didn't need to say another word. I just woke up my phone, opened an app, and slid it down the long table to him. The live dashboard of Apex Digital Ventures was glowing on the screen. Actually, Dad, I'm AJ Thorne. I founded Nexus Dynamics a decade ago, right after you called my logistics algorithm a silly little hobby. Dad grabbed the tablet, his eyes locked on my founder's photo in the corporate bio. This is some kind of sick joke, he said. But his voice was shaking. Nexus now runs the 3 largest freight platforms you rely on, I explained quietly. We also acquired the data firm that manages all your fleet analytics. Buying Grant & Sons is just the final piece of a 3-year plan. You've been spying on your own family, Daniel accused, his face contorted with rage. That's illegal. No, Daniel, that's called market research. Every single piece of information I have on this company came from public filings and industry reports, all completely legal. I turned back to my father. The truth is, this business has been sinking for years. Your routes are inefficient, your tech is a decade old, and you've lost 40% of your clients in 3 years. How dare you, Dad started, but I cut him off. I tried to help you. 6 months ago, Nexus Dynamics made an anonymous offer to partner. It would have saved the Grant name while we finance the upgrades you desperately need. You rejected it out of pride. My father's face went completely white. Project Nightingale, that was you. I just gave a small nod. I wanted to give you a chance to save the company without your ego getting in the way, but you refused. So you've been plotting this all along, Daniel yelled. A hostile takeover of our family's business. Not hostile, Daniel. A legal acquisition. For $60 million, which is honestly more than generous for a company on life support. My voice was steady, hiding the storm inside me. And let's be real, this stopped being a family company when Dad decided only one of his kids was good enough to lead no matter how quickly that son was running it into the ground. Olivia finally lowered her phone, the situation finally hitting her. So, you're like, our boss now? She asked. In a manner of speaking, yes. Although the entire current management team is being terminated. Dad shot out of his chair, its legs screaming across the hardwood floor. The deal is off, he roared. I will not sell my legacy to my own daughter to satisfy some pathetic, childish need for revenge. I just slowly shook my head. The contracts are already signed, Dad. Your board voted unanimously this morning. The press release goes out at 7 a.m. tomorrow. As of an hour ago, Nexus Dynamics owns Grant and Sons. I'll see you in court, he snarled, but the fight had already drained from his eyes. And your lawyers will do what? Exactly, I asked. They already approved the sale. They're the ones who told you it was the best offer you were ever going to get. What's your legal argument? That you're enraged the brilliant CEO you've been reading about is your own daughter. Mom finally spoke, her words slicing through a wine-fueled haze. All this time, Amelia, you were building this empire, and we all just thought that I was barely making rent I finished for her. Yes. Dad slammed his hand down on the dining table. You have a choice, Amelia, right now. You can be my daughter, or you can be the vulture who tore my life's work to shreds. You cannot be both. The ultimatum was so painfully predictable. 10 years ago, that would have shattered me. Tonight, it just proved that I'd been right about him all along. That's where you're wrong, Dad, I said softly. I'm both. I've always been both. You're just the one who refused to see me. Olivia started crying, mascara creating black rivers down her cheeks. What happens to us? Our trust funds? Our entire lives? That, I replied, depends completely on whether you want to earn a living or just be a liability on a spreadsheet. Daniel pointed at me, his hand trembling. You planned this for Christmas, didn't you? Just to humiliate all of us. I did this on Christmas because it was the only day I knew you'd all be in one place, I corrected him. And because 10 years ago, at this very dinner, Dad named you vice president, even though you had no experience at all. Meanwhile, my master's degree in logistics from CT and my successful software startup apparently didn't qualify me for even an unpaid internship. My father's face was a deep, furious crimson. That's not the same thing. Daniel is my son. And there it is, I said, my voice dropping to a near whisper. The real reason. It was never about my ideas or my qualifications. It was because I wasn't born his son. The truth hung in the air, sucking all the sound from the room. Even Daniel seemed to shrink in his chair. This dinner is over, Dad snapped. Everybody out. He turned and walked out, and seconds later, his study door slammed shut. Mom struggled to her feet, swaying just a little. I should go check on your father, she said, but she paused by my chair. Is it true you're worth $500 million? I nodded. And all those years you couldn't fly home for the holidays? When you said you couldn't afford it. I was funding the company, Mom. I needed everyone to believe I was a failure. She put a hand on my arm, her face a painting of confusion, then drifted out of the room. Soon it was just me, sitting at the head of a ruined Christmas dinner. The roast was cold, the candles had burned down to nothing. The family I'd worked so hard to prove myself to was gone. It was the victory I had always wanted. But it felt more like a funeral. I hid in my old bedroom while the war erupted downstairs. I could hear Dad yelling into the phone at his lawyers while Mom tried to calm him down. Daniel's furious shouts were a constant beat under Olivia's over-the-top sobbing. This room was a time capsule. The same bed, the same desk where I'd sketched out server architecture and wrote the first lines of my company's software. The shelves were packed with books on data analytics and classic novels. My old Mathlet trophies and coding awards were just collecting dust, and none of it impressed the one person whose opinion I actually cared about. I ran my hand over old notebooks, pulling one from the shelf. Its pages were crammed with diagrams, business plans, and the first lines of code that would become Pulse metrics. It was almost a joke. This whole tech empire began right here, in the one room I'd always felt completely invisible in. A sharp rap on the door made me jump. I opened it to my brother Ethan, his face flushed with fury and the heavy scent of scotch. We have to talk, he slurred, shoving his way inside. I shut the door, crossed my arms, and didn't move an inch. What's there to talk about, Ethan? How I ruined Christmas dinner, or how you expect to inherit a business you've been bleeding dry for years. You think you're so clever, he spat, pacing the floor like a trapped animal. Little Maya, with her secret identity and her big-shot startup. Did you get some kind of twisted pleasure from lying to us all this time? About as much as you enjoyed stealing my ideas and calling them yours, I shot back. Remember Christmas 6 years ago, when I mapped out that social media prediction model for you? Dad called it a fantasy, and 2 months later you presented my exact slideshow as your own genius concept. Ethan froze, his face like stone. I was working for this family. I was the one putting in the hours at that office while you were playing tech goddess in California trying to prove a point. You put in the hours, I'll give you that. But what did you actually achieve, Daniel? Besides expensing 5-star restaurants and using the company card to pay for your trips to Aspen. His jaw clenched tight. You don't know the first thing about what I do. I landed the Axiom Automotive account. Axiom only signed with us because I made a call to their logistics chief as AJ Thorne and personally vouched for Grant's services. It was all to inflate the company's value before my final offer, I told him. And I know exactly what you do, because I've been running a silent audit on the servers for the last 6 months, including the accounting files you tried to delete. The blood drained from his face. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the $300,000 you embezzled into a shell corporation over the last 2 years, Daniel. I'm talking about the fake invoices for a consulting firm that just happens to be registered to an address in the Cayman Islands. I know everything. He took a step toward me. You can't prove any of that. I have the digital trail, the account numbers, and the server logs showing the transfers were made from your office computer on days when you were the only executive on site. I held his stare. I'm not reporting this, Daniel. The scandal would destroy the brand. But you are going to resign. You'd stab your own brother in the back? No, I'd hold a criminal accountable who just happens to be my brother. It is not the same thing. A heavy silence filled the space between us before he spun around. This isn't over, he snarled, yanking open the door. Actually, it is, I said to his back. You just haven't figured that out yet. The door had barely latched when a new knock came. This time it was my sister Olivia, makeup perfect again despite the tear stains on her cheeks. So, you're secretly a tech billionaire, she said, walking in and flopping down on my bed. Wow, that's impressive. I had to laugh at her complete 180. Weren't you just complaining about your social standing 10 minutes ago? She shrugged, admiring her manicure. I'm flexible. It's crucial for a lifestyle blogger. Her eyes lit up with a familiar scheming look. Think of the content. My sister, the Miami real estate mogul. My audience would go wild. Is that why you're here, Olivia, to pitch me? It's a strategic partnership, she said, adjusting her silk blouse. You need an image that's less ruthless. And I need to be seen with real money, not just comped brunches. Her proposal was so brazen, so perfectly Olivia, that I almost admired her nerve. And what about actually working? Learning the gallery business? Doing more than just posting selfies? She crinkled her nose as if I'd asked her to clean the toilets. Ugh, no. That stuff is so boring, and honestly, art history just puts me to sleep. But I could be the public face, a brand ambassador. I can connect us to the luxury lifestyle world. A lifestyle ambassador for the Beaumont Gallery, I repeated, letting the words hang there. Do you hear how ridiculous that sounds? Olivia puffed up. Go ahead and laugh. Everyone else does. But my online brand is a valuable asset, whether you see it or not. I built it myself from scratch, just like you. For a moment, she actually rendered me speechless. She had a bizarre point, even if our ideas of work were universes apart. I'll consider it, I finally conceded. But not right now. She grinned, savoring the small win. Just so you know, I already posted a cryptic story about a huge family shakeup. The views are insane. After she breezed out, I sat at my childhood desk, opening my laptop to review the gallery's debt portfolios. Another quiet knock pulled me from my thoughts. Come in, I said, expecting it was Maria with coffee. But it was my mother, looking clearer than I'd seen her all night. She'd traded her cocktail dress for a simple cashmere lounge set, her New York hostess armor finally off. Your father has barricaded himself in the library with a bottle of whiskey and the gallery's original charter, she said, sitting on the window seat where she once read me stories. He's hoping to find some ancient loophole to stop this. He won't, I said flatly. The debt is real. His own accountant confirmed it. She nodded, her gaze drifting around my old bedroom. You know, I kept it exactly as you left it. I always assumed you'd come home after this little Miami adventure was over. It wasn't an adventure, Mom. It was my career. An $80 million empire, she whispered, shaking her head in disbelief. My daughter built all of that while we assumed she was barely getting by. I swiveled in my chair to face her directly. You could have visited. Any of you could have asked about my projects with genuine interest, but you never did. Tears welled up in her eyes. I knew Chloe. Not how much, not the details, but I knew you were exceptional. I saw it when you were a little girl, building cities with blocks. Your brain just saw things differently. She wiped a tear away. I just didn't know how to defend that kind of mind in this house, not with a husband like your father. You could have stood up for me, I said, the familiar burn of resentment rising in my chest. All those dinner parties where he dismissed my ideas, called me a foolish girl. You just stood there. I was wrong, she confessed, her voice almost inaudible. I told myself I was keeping the family peace, being a dutiful wife. But I see now that I failed you as a mother. Her raw honesty cracked the armor I'd worn for years. I came here expecting a war, with lawyers and shouting. I never prepared for an apology. So what is the plan? Mom asked softly. Tomorrow, all the gallery's loans are being consolidated. Apex Properties officially takes control. The Beaumont name will stay on the door for now. But the entire board is out. I let that sink in. Dad and James are being offered positions as curators emeritus, if they even take them. It's for show, to smooth the transition. And you'll be moving back to New York? I shook my head. No, I'm based in Miami. That's where my business is. She nodded slowly, understanding the unspoken message. I was done with this apartment, this family, and the role they wanted me to play. Your father might not ever forgive you for this, she whispered. I know, I answered. But this was never about getting his forgiveness. It was about earning his respect. After she was gone, I worked through the night, polishing the press release and ignoring a stream of frantic texts from Olivia. When the first gray light of morning hit the windows, I put on my most severe power suit and twisted my hair into a sleek knot. This morning was either the beginning of a new Beaumont legacy or the end of the old one. I was prepared for either outcome. When I came downstairs at 7, the penthouse was eerily quiet. Our housekeeper poured my espresso without a word, her expression a perfect blend of respect and fear. The formal dining room was spotless, scrubbed clean of last night's disastrous dinner. Not a shred of evidence of our family's collapse remained, just a suffocating tension. My phone buzzed. 2 missed calls from my CFO, anxious about the announcement. A new text from Olivia popped up. So, did you nuke the whole family? Anyone left standing? I was typing back when Dad appeared in the doorway. He looked like he'd aged a decade overnight. His usual commanding posture was gone. He hadn't slept. The library, now. It wasn't a request. I followed him down the hall to the room that served as the family's throne room, its mahogany walls lined with his awards. There were art world accolades and photos of Dad with famous artists and city officials, a testament to his influence. And of course, not a single photo of me since I left for college. He settled into the enormous leather chair behind his desk, a classic tactic to dominate the space. I refused to take the seat opposite him. Instead, I strolled over and perched on the edge of his desk, a move that flipped the power dynamic and clearly rattled him. My lawyers worked all night, he said, his voice hollow. The loan agreements are all ironclad. Of course they are, I replied coolly. The Beaumont has been bleeding money for 5 years. Your taste is outdated, your curators are complacent, and you haven't brought in a single relevant new artist in a decade. They knew this was their only way out. This gallery was valued at $50 million just 3 years ago, he murmured, looking defeated. The gallery was appraised at $50 million, I corrected. Its debt is 40. Another year and the banks would have seized everything and sold the name. He shot me a venomous look. Is that your plan? To dismantle your grandfather's legacy? I respect what he created. The Beaumont name stays, but the gallery is being dragged into the 21st century. For the first time, I saw a spark of actual fear in his eyes. What does that mean exactly? I'd waited my entire life for him to ask my professional opinion. The irony was suffocating. The Beaumont is becoming the flagship cultural space for my company. We're launching an online sales platform and focusing on emerging digital artists. Most of the junior staff can stay, but your entire senior team is gone. And what about me? He asked, the question heavy with dread. You'll be offered the title of Director Emeritus. No real power, but you keep your office. His jaw clenched. A figurehead. A paid advisor, I corrected smoothly, with a handsome salary and full health benefits. He abruptly stood and walked to the huge window overlooking the park. For a long moment, he just stared at the city, his back to me. How did you do it? He finally asked, his voice raw. Build a company from nothing? With no connections, no seed money. I had the education you paid for, I reminded him, and a burning desire to prove you were wrong about me. He turned back to face me, his gaze direct. I was so sure you would fail. I know, I said, you and everyone else. 90% of startups go under, he said at last, weighing each word. I thought I was protecting you. By cutting me off and ensuring I couldn't get a loan in this city? I raised an eyebrow. That isn't protection, Dad, that's control. The word made him flinch. Perhaps. I took what my own father started and I made it a landmark. I truly believed I knew best. But you didn't, I said coldly. You were wrong about me, wrong about the art world, and you were dead wrong that James was the one to carry on the family legacy. The mention of my brother's name made his expression turn to stone. Leo has his flaws, but he bleeds for this company. Leo has been trying to sell it from under you for 6 months, I said flatly, and I have the security footage to prove it. It's why I'm making my move now, before he bankrupts the entire hotel chain. My father sank into his leather chair, the news hitting him like a physical blow. That's impossible. Over $2 million, laundered through fake vendor contracts and maintenance fees. The paper trail is perfect. But why? He has a generous salary, a family trust fund. Gambling debts, I said. High-stakes games in Macau. Our auditor found everything. He covered his face with his hands, and when he looked up, he suddenly looked every one of his 70 years. So my son is a con artist, my life's work is failing, and I was completely blind to it all. The raw honesty in his voice stunned me. I was prepared for more shouting, more denial, not this empty, broken confession. Not blind, I said, my tone softening just a bit. You were just looking the wrong way. A heavy silence filled the office, thick with years of unspoken arguments and disappointment. When he finally spoke, all the arrogance was gone, replaced by a flicker of real curiosity. How did you even do this? He asked. No connections, no access to our finances. How did you build something strong enough to challenge us? For once, the question felt real. I started small, I explained, telling him how I took on consulting gigs for boutique hotels to build up capital. Then I created an AI platform that personalized the entire guest experience, from booking to checkout. It was based on that proposal you rejected when I was 23. I saw a flash of memory in his eyes. The guest loyalty program. I nodded, surprised he even remembered. Yes, I perfected it, made it smarter, and used it to sign my first major hotel clients. I reinvested every dollar, lived on cheap takeout for 4 years, and built a team of innovators who believed in me. Without the Monarch family name to open a single door, he said quietly, almost to himself. Actually, it helped, I had to admit. See, when everyone underestimates you, it becomes a kind of superpower. No one ever sees you coming. He almost cracked a smile at that, clearly. Another silence fell between us, but this one felt less like a war. I checked my watch. The merger goes public in 1 hour. We need to figure out the next steps. What happens to Leo and Chloe? He asked, his voice low. Leo has a choice. He can resign quietly with a small severance, or he can face felony fraud charges. As for Chloe, I paused. She actually pitched me an incredible idea last night to become our new head of brand experience. Her social media following is a goldmine, if we use it the right way. My dad looked completely baffled. You'd keep them involved after what they did. This was never about revenge, Dad. This was about finally taking my place in this family, but doing it my way. He nodded slowly, his gaze falling to the unsigned acquisition papers on his desk, then back to me with a strange new expression. You completely outplayed me, he said, and I was shocked to hear the undeniable sound of pride in his voice. Your grandfather would have loved this. Coming from him, that was the highest praise I had ever received. A complex emotion washed over me, not victory, not forgiveness, but something entirely new. I learned from the best, I admitted, even when you didn't know I was watching. He reached his hand across the wide mahogany desk. Well then, Chairman. I shook it, sealing the first real agreement we had ever made as equals. Welcome to the Vantage Group, Dad. 6 months after that showdown, I stood in the lobby of our new flagship hotel in Boston. The old Monarch Grand was transformed sleek, modern lounges, cutting-edge tech everywhere, and an energy that honored its history while speeding toward the future. As CEO, my life was a constant shuffle between our 2 HQs, managing the merger and our ambitious new projects. The integration had its challenges, but it was smoother than I ever dreamed. Dad shocked everyone by embracing his new advisory role with surprising energy. Once the sting of the takeover faded, he found he loved mentoring the young hotel managers and reconnecting with our most loyal long-term guests. We even set up a weekly masterclass for him to share his decades of hospitality wisdom. I actually started to enjoy them. For the first time, our relationship was built on respect, not resentment. Leo's situation was, predictably, a lot more dramatic. When I confronted him with the evidence, his first move was to threaten a lawsuit. But he quickly realized he was completely cornered. He took the deal, repay the money from his trust, step down from his executive position, and enroll in business school if he ever wanted a future with the company. To my absolute astonishment, he chose the MBA program. He's halfway through his first semester and sometimes calls me with surprisingly sharp questions about our market strategy. And Chloe has been a revelation as our new brand ambassador. She's heading a fast-growing division focused on bespoke travel experiences, and her social media savvy has been critical. Her followers loved the family redemption narrative, which she expertly crafted while burying the messy details. Her online campaigns brought in a younger, wealthier clientele we'd been chasing for years. But my mother had the most profound change of all. Freed from being the family peacemaker, she cut back on drinking, started a foundation for underprivileged kids, and joined the board of a mentorship program for female executives. I want to help other girls like you, she told me, so their mothers don't make the same mistakes I did. Walking through the hotels these days, I get smiles and nods of genuine respect. I'm not some mystery investor, or just Richard Monarch's overlooked daughter. I'm Amelia, the CEO who saved a hospitality empire and built something new for our future. My assistant's voice on the intercom pulled me from my thoughts. Your father is in the main boardroom with the quarterly reports, she said. And your mother just confirmed your dinner tonight with the new partners from Asia. I thanked her and started toward the meeting, pausing by the new digital timeline in the lobby. It scrolled through our entire history, from my grandfather's first guest house to the Monarch Vantage Group. My photo was finally on that wall, right beside my father and grandfather. 3 generations. Thanksgiving was next week, and I knew this year was going to be different. We were trying a quiet family dinner, something authentic, without the performative nonsense of past holidays. No formal toasts, no shop talk, just us. We were all slowly learning how to be a family again. The journey from being an outcast to being the CCO was harder than I could have ever imagined when I left Boston 10 years ago. Juggling this business and my own young family requires a level of patience I'm still developing. And sometimes, the weight of old wounds feels like it could unravel everything, especially when old dynamics creep back into board meetings. You see, buying out the company wasn't the hard part. The real challenge was rebuilding the relationships that had to survive our complicated past and our new reality. Dad still occasionally slips into his old, commanding tone before catching himself, and I still find myself bracing for criticism that never arrives. But bit by bit, the Monarch family is finding a new way forward. Mom hosted a brunch last month where, for the first time ever, everyone talked, everyone listened, and no one left angry. These small wins felt enormous. The biggest moment came late one evening, as Dad and I were reviewing the first quarter's performance. The results were staggering. Guest retention was at 95%, and new bookings had driven revenue up 40%. He just stared at the screen and said, "You've done more for this company in 6 months than I managed in my first decade as CEO." That one sentence healed a part of me I didn't even realize was still broken. It wasn't that I still needed his professional validation. It was the personal acknowledgement I had wanted my whole life. This whole saga taught me that business success is not a magic fix for a broken family. The rush of proving everyone wrong was thrilling for a moment, but it felt hollow until it led to a true connection. I had to learn the difference between winning a fight and actually healing a wound. As I walked into the boardroom to meet my father, I thought about the long road from that bitter family fight to this moment right now. I learned that success is not the best revenge. Success without reconciliation is just a lonely victory. The real win wasn't proving my dad was wrong, it was creating a new future where we could both be right together. For anyone out there who knows the unique pain of a family business, who's ever felt invisible to their own relatives, I hope my story gives you some hope, but also a reality check. Building your own legacy is important, but healing a family requires more than just a profitable balance sheet. It takes brutal honesty, a willingness to be vulnerable, and the courage to offer a second chance, even when you're not sure it's deserved. Have you ever been through a similar crisis in your own family business? Leave a comment and share your story. How did you manage the tough intersection of family and work? Likes, subscribe, and share this video if any of this felt familiar. Thanks for watching my journey from outsider to CEO. And remember, the real measure of success isn't what you build on your own, but what you can finally build together.